This morning it's good to be around with you. How many of you know that school's back in session? We got kids back, right? I'm glad to tell you that all the Brunses, well, we've had no casualties so far, okay? Like they're in school, like things are going well. I will tell you though that they were all ready for the first day on Thursday, ready, locked and loaded, all dressed, right? We got a picture out front, did all the ins and outs. And they're out waiting for the bus, and you hear the bus coming, right? And the bus stops one driveway north of us, and that's where our neighbors are at. And stops there, and the bus driver, he loads them, and he comes down the driveway. My 3 daughters and my wife are standing out there, and he's looking at his bus route list and passes right past them, all right? So it was a great way to start the first day of school. He got left at the end of the driveway. Now granted, he circled back around, all right? He got him. But bless his heart, he couldn't have been going more than 3 miles an hour, looking at his route list, driving on the road, drove right past him. My wife's like, hey, that was it. So I'm so proud to say there's no casualties in that at all. There's no casualties. But I want to tell you, as school begins here as a church also, I want to let you know, start looking for those things that are beginning to happen. Things in the summer, there's things that take place that we're not as programmed. I hate to use that word, but not as programmed during the summer as we are during the school year. And the reason why is because you with families and you as people, I don't know what it is about summer, but people vacation in summer, all right? Even people that don't have kids vacation in summer. I'm not sure what that is. If I didn't have children, I'd vacation in December. That's when it's cheaper, right? Like go where it's warm when it's cold outside. But anyways, we do that. And so be looking, as you'll see announcements this week, video of student ministry stuff on Wednesday nights, some shift there, and some things that are taking place. Also, though, I want to remind you of the backpack display that's in the entryway out there. Please take a moment to stop and pick up a little quarter sheet card with the tear off and check that out. This year we are partnering again with North Fairview Elementary with the backpack program, and I want to tell you, we mentioned this and you've heard about it, but we want to reiterate it again, all right, the school's starting, is that we're doing a little bit different this year than we did in the past, is that we're not going to ask you to bring items off the backpack list of food items, that is, but rather take that and prayerfully consider if you could support a child on a monthly basis, or maybe a one-time donation that will be set aside in that backpack fund so we can provide for them. And the reason we're doing that is that, A, we want to be the best stewards of the resources that God has given us, all right? And we found that if we put out there to say, bring a thing of macaroni and cheese, your version, my version, and somebody else's version of macaroni and cheese looks a little different, right? And so when we see that, we have found that we can actually save a decent amount of dollar resource, percentage-wise, if we are to do it and funnel it through the church. So take that, take a look at that, and be in prayer about that. Also with that, when we have our cookout that you're going to hear about more, the tailgate party, there will be an opportunity for free will donation at that time, and all those funds go to help these students. I want to let you know, a $25 donation a month will provide 22 meals, 8 drinks, and 8 snacks for one kid. If you put that into dollar form, like that's a very, very good investment in some children that might not eat on the weekends another way. And so I want to thank you ahead of time for those that have been partnering with that, but also those who are going to choose to do so for the very first time. Also, I want you to grab your pages or your devices and turn to Romans chapter 13 today. We've been journeying, that's how we say it, journeying through the book of Romans, and we're nearing an end, right? We're on the second to last week, we'll wrap it up next week. But we've been looking at this, all these things that Paul is writing to the church in Rome that's living in a culture that's just offbeat from God's plan, right? I mean, many of them come from Jewish backgrounds, some from Gentile backgrounds, some from a plethora of Greek and Roman God background, like they're coming together, and now they're the church. And Paul's encouraging them, reminding them, but also teaching them maybe some things they haven't heard before. And so in this, as we look at Romans 13 today, I want to start by just reading verse 1. And once we read verse 1, we all can take a deep breath, all right? And just squeeze the lemons out of us today, all right? So here we go. This is what it says. It says, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. All right? Now I want you to do this morning. All right? Because for some of you, you go, I don't like that, right? Because the people who are put in authority are not my fan, all right? Like, I'm not a fan of those people. And you should see the taxation that's been imposed upon me, all right? Just go like this. Can we all do this today? All right? Because the reality is, the same thing as what the church in Rome was speaking of. The exact same thing. In fact, deeper levels of discomfort and disdain towards those in authority. But I want us to see that when we see this is that when we think of authority, it's not something that... When we think of authority, it's not something we all cheer about. We know that. But more importantly, when we think of authority, I think it's because we look at authority through a worldly lens, not always a biblical lens. On Friday, we went to go pick up our daughters, their second day of school, right? We pull up in our Suburban, we get there, and of course, Ava was on the school bus. She's supposed to be the car rider line. So here she comes running from the school bus, right? We're getting everybody there. We had to be the awkward family that pulls up to the #1 parking spot and wait for your kids because they're not ready yet, right? And so we did that, and they all load into the car, and we asked the proverbial question, how was your day, right? And if as a parent, you know how that goes. They tell you the surface level things. Well, so-and-so got in trouble for throwing corn at lunch and different things like that, right? Nothing of deep nature. But Ava says this, kindergarten this year, right? And she's learning what it's like to be in a classroom with all different kinds of kids all the time. She says this, she says, I want you to know, she says, the boys in our class almost got our whole class a color change because they wouldn't listen and they were terrible, all right? Okay, now you have to understand first of all what a color change means. If you don't have children in the Siemens School District, a color change is a color thing that they've implemented. What that means is everyone starts on the color green, and if you get something wrong or do something, you're lowered a color. In red's like the demise, okay? Like red's the color where you're sent to the principal or your parents are called, that kind of thing. And so if you get a color change, it's a horrible experience. Now granted, our one daughter makes it very clear to our other daughters, she's never had a color change before, okay? So we need to make it a competitive thing in the Brun's household also, right? And so when you talk about this idea of authority for her, we begin to see that the first thing was you have to understand the color change. The second is the one who decides who gets the color change isn't the students. Do we get that? It's the teacher. The one who is in what? Authority. And you have to understand is that if I was to make the decision on whether I got a color change, how many of you would live on a green every single day? Right? Let's be honest. You would think you were. At least you just wouldn't tell other people. Or you're maybe the Eeyore type that you're always on a red. Alright? You know? But the person who changes the color in that classroom, makes the color change, is the teacher. Is the one who is in authority. I wonder how many times the teacher heard this thing. They heard these words. This isn't fair. Or maybe it wasn't me that was talking, it was him, right? Or it wasn't my fault, it was their fault, right? You see, when we talk about authority, authority is something that's difficult to swallow. But we're reminded here in Romans that authority is given by God. Hear that again. Authority is given by God. And right when I say that, I know there's some of us that will go, but you don't know this person, right? Like, they probably squeaked by. Like, God was dozing. They came on the Sabbath day, right? And they sneaked into authority. The truth is, Romans tells us quite the opposite. Because if you're like me, I can embrace it when someone I agree with or the circumstances seem to be in the right hands. I can grasp that. But when 1 Peter 2, I want you to hear this. 1 Peter 2, verse 17, chapter 2, verse 17, 18 says this. Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Okay, those four right there, you could live a whole life of just grumbling with that, right? But then you jump down, it says, servants, be submissive to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and gentle, but also those who are unreasonable. See, I can swallow authority when it's reasonable, right? But when the person who is in charge is unreasonable, I have a problem with that. And I know many of you probably do too, right? But we have to remember that God has placed everyone in authority. He's allowed for that to take place. I remember in 7th grade woodshop, I don't know if they still have that in school today or not. It's not a good idea to give 13-year-old boys raging hormones, bandsaws, and belt sanders to make a project, all right, unsupervised. But that's basically what happened, is I was given the project to build a box, a little wooden box. Very simplistic. You put two ends, two sides, glue it together, put a lid on it, and you clamp it and sand it. And you make it look pretty, you put some lacquer on it, you take it home to mom, all right? That's what you're supposed to do. That semester, I made 5 of those, okay? 5 of those. Because 4 of them, well, I back up 3 of them, my teacher lost. I know for a fact, because I handed it to him and it never was given back. The second one, I sanded a hole through the side, right? In the last one I made, and he graded it on the very last day, and he only gave me a C+. And why? Because it was late. That was his reason. And I have to say, when I look at unreasonable, I think of Mr. Rippey. Mr. Rippey was a tad bit unreasonable. But guess what? I didn't have the authority or the place to hire Mr. Rippey. I would like to have fired Mr. Rippey. But I didn't get to hire Mr. Rippey. You see, we think of this in being the authority, and as Peter writes, even the unreasonable. There's nothing we can do more about that than what God says to do, and that is submit. Submit. You see, we think about Paul in Romans and Peter in his letter, both are writing to some people that are experiencing stiff persecution from the governing officials for their faith. It was way more than an old shop teacher with an axe to grind. It was a government who was looking to oppose and oppress and distort what they were about, trying to get them to walk away from God, to use the term de-church themselves. And all the while, what Paul continues to say in Romans 13:2, he says, consequently, whoever rebels against authority is rebelling against God. What God has instituted, and those who do will bring judgment on who? Themselves. See, wait a minute, I know you're thinking, Nate, you're telling me that God has allowed people to be in authority that could ruin me. They could harm me. I just want you in unison this morning to say, yes. 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 Yeah. And you're like, nope, I disagree. I don't believe that. The truth is God has placed them in, God has allowed them to be placed into authority. See, woven within the issues of with authority is a theological mountain that we face rather constantly within our lives. It is called the sovereignty of God that's woven in. You see, because maybe you've heard and battled this, that there's a healthy tension to question what is right or wrong within our walk with God. Maybe you've heard some of these. Do I tithe or not? Or maybe I just give what's left over. Or maybe the question is it okay? How far, this is the question in student ministry posed a lot of times, how far can I go sexually with my boyfriend or girlfriend and still be okay with God? Or am I supposed to abstain and save it for marriage? See, there's tons of I do's or I don'ts, but these are just a few examples that are contemplated in and outside the church, maybe even argued about. But when it comes to the truth of the matter, we begin, the reason why sovereignty of God gets woven in, or we need to interject it, is because when we do that and we look at Scripture and we contemplate what God is asking of us, we are questioning the authority of God. And you say, I've never questioned the authority of God. If we open Scripture and we read it and we go, does God really want me to do that? That's questioning the authority of God. You see, and this is why that Paul and Peter can write this, is that each of those in particular things we mentioned is giving to God, sexual relations, etc. God speaks clearly about such things. And when we choose otherwise, we are questioning the sovereignty of God. This plays out even more so, I believe, when God doesn't do exactly what we desire Him to do, especially in the context of authority. Within the church, God has placed a structure of authority, and it looks a lot different than the world's version. The world's version of authority is what? Top down. You know what that means, right? There's bosses, and then there's workers. And then there's an owner, and everything else goes across one person's desk. That's the way it works. And therefore, whatever they decide, whatever they choose goes. And guess what? You will submit to that. That's what the world says. And this is why there's a tension when we talk about biblical authority and submitting to God and submitting to the rulers of this world. There's a tension there. It's because not always will the rulers of the world look at it the way God looks at it, the way God teaches it. And we look at authority in Scripture. Is that Jesus modeled is what we call servant leadership. See, the reason we talk that is He doesn't necessarily submit to His own thoughts. Quite the opposite. Jesus submitted to who? The authority of God.